This is Duke University.
So let me just say very quickly, make a few comments that I think for me to sort of help focus the discussion. One thing that besides the master planning and holistic design, these are instant cities. These are cities built without a history, and it's a sort of dreamscape of late modernity. There is no interest now on the part of these large-scale real estate developers to rebuild existing urban fabrics. No interest at all of integrating these projects into the urban fabric. It's a kind of triage, really. It's an abandonment of cities as they exist, and the creation of something else that is more linked to the world economy than it is to what exists right outside their door. That, to me, is what's the most phenomenal feature of this. It's not that this kind of high modernist kind of approach to city building is new. We have, everything from, Broadacres and Ebenezer Howard and Le Corbusier and the Garden City movement and so forth. And company towns. There's a long history of very similar projects, but what makes this different is that these are efforts to integrate or to establish a place within the world economy. The issues about finance I find incredibly opaque and almost impossible to discover, like who's really investing in these places. In the South African case, what makes it very complicated is that companies in South Africa today are following the same model that existed under apartheid, where, say, something like Anglo-American Corporation owns all these subsidiaries. But all the subsidiaries own part of the parent company, and the subsidiaries own parts of each other. And so it's really, when you say follow the money, it becomes literally impossible because you start following your tail. And some of these projects, I think, are very similar in that respect. One of the things that I think that they've caught on to, even though they don't fully acknowledge it, but it's certainly the same ethos, which is this model of charter cities. An economist, Paul Romer, former economist, I think he's now policy entrepreneur, who is marketing this idea of charter cities, which is that you can plop a new city down, and the ones that he was well known for was in Honduras. Plopping a city down where you create your own rules, your institutional arrangements, where you bring in foreign judges and you bring in foreign laws and you bring in foreign workers and so forth. I mean, these to me are basically company towns for the 21st century. Charter cities is also spun off into startup cities, and this dovetails also what I find also equally fascinating is that there's a lot of huge corporate players now that are quite interested in building cities. I got invited to a conference in Germany that was after I got there, I realized that it was sponsored by Siemens company. And Siemens was quite interested in second-tier cities in Africa because they thought the first-tier cities had already been gobbled up by other investors, but they wanted to go into these second-tier cities and rebuild the water systems, rebuild the infrastructures, and so forth. So IBM, Siemens, Cisco Systems, and a number of other global players now are really interested in this idea of smart urbanism, sustainable urbanism, where they want to build whole cities. They want the right to do the whole thing. And it dovetails with this idea of the zone format. And Charlie and I were talking about this a little earlier about this idea of exception. There's so many exceptions now that the exception becomes the norm. All of these places proclaim in a sense, their independence from local administrations, and they get that independence, where they have no public oversight whatsoever. So on the one side, they're quite visible in the sense they want to be cosmopolitan and you can see from the way they portray themselves is they want to be kind of the Dubais of Africa. So on one side, they're cosmopolitan and up to date and so forth. On the other side, they're quite opaque in terms of like who really runs the place and who's really in charge. I'll just say a few more things very quickly. There's the building typologies, which was not in the paper, but something that I'm quite interested in. How do we identify different types of these cities? Because they're not all alike. The first, and probably the dominant one, is sort of large-scale, mixed-use satellite cities that are typically created on the edge of existing cities, and they combine the features of a central business district, high-end residential, and leisure and entertainment. And the mantra gets repeated in various forms, but live, work, and play, that gets borrowed from, from the kind of policy, traveling ideas of policy. There's variations of it, but it's all the same. The second type of city are what I loosely call terminal cities. That is, new urban landscapes constructed around major intermodal transportation hubs. There's a literature on what's called Aerotropolis, the airport city. I, by accident, fell into a conference at Oliver Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg, where John Casarda was the leading figure who came and talked about turning Oliver Tambo into a Aerotropolis, a city in its own right. And so these building cities around transportation hubs, I think, is a key thing. Takoradi in Ghana, the port city is being rebuilt, and a city is being built on King City is being built around that. Sungate in Namibia is also modeled on this, and any number of others. There's one called El Noor, which is, believe it or not, in Djibouti and Yemen on both sides, and they want to build the second largest bridge in the world. They say the first, but actually the largest is in China. And that's a terminal city because it's a major transport hub. These are sort of rent-seeking operations because then you can siphon off rent. I'm going to move really quickly. The third type are leisure entertainment cities. These kind of offer amenities of a resort vacations. Usually gateways into the interior of Africa, so people come to the coast and enjoy themselves. In Mauritius, there's a number of those close to Mauritius. And the fourth and final type are information technology hubs that are mimicking what's happened in India. And there's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of these planned in various parts. Kansas City is probably the one that's the most most well known, but they're popping up particularly in Uganda and in Kenya. So I'll just stop right there.